Okay. Okay, good evening all. Welcome to this evening's meeting of the Communities Committee. This is a public meeting and members of the public and press are permitted to report on the proceedings. Reporting includes filming, photography, making an audio recording and providing commentary on proceedings. Please note this meeting is recorded and streamed live. These recordings are published on the relevant meeting page on the Council's website. By choosing to attend this public meeting, you are deemed to have given your consent to being filmed or recorded and for any footage to be broadcast or published. If the alarm sounds, the premises must be evacuated immediately. Do not spend time collecting personal belongings. All emergency escape routes are clearly signed. Once you've left the building, the assembly point is on High Street opposite the Guildhall. Members and other speakers are reminded to use their microphone when speaking. Okay. On to the agenda itself. Item 1, appointment of substitutes. Julie?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, we do have a number of substitutes with you tonight. Mark Bayliss is here for Bill Amos. Aladitra is here for Nida Hassan. Jenny Barnes for Tom Collins and Adrian Gregson for Jabba Riaz.
Thank you. And item 2, declarations of interest. Not seeing anything, so no. Item 3, public participation. No. The item 4 is the minutes of the meeting held on the 3rd of November. I'll just go through them by page and then pause as we go through the items one by one. For comments, page 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Anything out there anybody wishes to raise? Okay, thanks very much. Item 5, setting of the budget 2022-23 and the medium-term financial plan 2026-27. We've got Shane to my right, and I think we've got Mark on to bring into the conversation later. So, Shane.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, councillors. This is the third and for this committee final stage in the preparation for the budget for 22-23. Any recommendations which are presented tonight will obviously flow through to Policy and Resources Committee if approved on the 8th of February and then onwards if approved again through to Council at the end of the month. So this stage what we're doing is just bringing together any proposals which we've received to date and to collect any new proposals which might be tabled this evening. I'm very grateful to members for this time round for presenting ideas in advance. It always gives us the opportunity to do some quick diligence work and to compile the figures into a report. So I'm very grateful for members for presenting this information. It's very useful to do it this way round. Overall, there are 4 recommendations. The first just notes the proposed budgets for the various services under the remit of this committee. Just glancing at Appendix 1, members will see the budgets which fall within the remit of this committee and note that the overall increase between 21-22 and 22-23 budgets is around about £100,000 on a budget of 3.4 million is about 5%. So just very much where you would expect it to be, taking into account wage inflation, incremental drift, and price inflation too. So that's very good. Overall, we're expecting our income position to return largely to what it was in the pre-pandemic position. Obviously, there are some risks around that, particularly in some areas such as car parking and so on. But we'll see how that pans out. At the moment, those are the assumptions that we're making. So I have an expectation that we should be. That's a reasonably robust position. The second is around the income and efficiency plans that we have. Now we have a residual items in respect of this committee, largely around some increases in income in the museums areas, and we know there are plans in place to achieve those. So again, I'm happy that those present a robust position. Then the third is around any changes to the capital programme, which is Appendix 3. That I've not had any indications of any reductions or changes in that programme, but there are a couple of items in the report which present new proposals for addition to the capital programme, which I'll comment on in a second. And then finally, to receive any new budget proposals. And as I mentioned, there are a couple that we've received, which I'll just talk through now, and then open up if members want to provide any further items this evening. So turning to paragraph 4.4, which lists the new revenue items, these are items which would be drawn from reserves as one-off items, so wouldn't have an impact on this year's council tax position or on the medium-term financial plan going forward, subject to there being sufficient reserves to meet the costs. The first is a continuation of a grant which we paid 3 years ago. Members will recall the committee agreed in 2019 to make a grant to the Worcester Food Bank of £15,000 per year for 3 years. And I'm proposing, having had a discussion with the director of that charity, that we should continue with the same level of subsidy for them. The second is a proposal received from a committee member in respect of an installation of an artificial cricket wicket at Northwick Park. We've done some work around that, and there is a short annex to the report which sets out some of the detail behind that proposal. An estimated cost of up to £10,000. Now, in certain circumstances, that might be defined as a capital item, but it would be de minimis for capital if it comes in below 10,000. So I've put it in as a revenue item just to make sure that it's covered properly. So that would require a withdrawal from reserves. The other items are at paragraph 4.7. These are capital items. These are ones which are a substantial cost and which will have a benefit over a single year. The first is in respect of we're receiving a property back on the first floor of the Comer Gardens Institute from Platform Housing. The proposal is to convert that into a facility for community use. There is some more detail on that, paragraph 4.8. And then the second is in respect of changes to the entrance gates and fencing at Gorse Hill and Elbury Mount Local Nature Reserve. This is designed to reduce some of the antisocial behaviour problems which have been seen there, and there are more details in respect of that at paragraph 4.9. So that's the total of the submissions that we've had so far to the committee. If members want to present any more items, then we'll make a note of those, and if approved, take them forward to Policy and Resources. Otherwise, I'm happy to take any questions if I can help. Thank you.
Okay, Shane, thank you. Questions and comment? I've got Matt Lamb first.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I think 3 of the 4 I can accept and think they're reasonable. Worcester Food Bank, I wish it wasn't necessary, but of course it is, and therefore I would very much support the continuing of the funding there. The artificial cricket wicket, I thought that was very positive. As Lord Denning once said, cricket is a delight of everyone. So I didn't know until I read this paper about this interesting tape ball concept. I'd never heard of that, so I learned something today reading through the papers. That was interesting. The issue around Gorse Hill, I can accept that. That makes sense to me. Comer Gardens Institute. You know, I live very close to Comer Garden Institute, and I walk past it virtually every day of the last 20 years I've lived in Worcester. And £140,000, I think, is a lot of money out of limited council funds for this conversion. I do question, is there a business case for why this is converted? Because I know the bottom is used as a dance classes and exercise classes. It is also used as a polling station, obviously, during elections. But I'm wondering whether this is really needed. Is there not spare capacity that could be used elsewhere in community facilities in the area? And, you know, if it has been used as a self-contained flat by Platform Housing, again, is there not a shortage of those kind of properties available in the area? And therefore, I do have to wonder, what is the business case for this? Do we really need the extra capacity of this particular? It feels a little bit pork barrel-y, if I'm being brutally honest, but perhaps I should be corrected on that one.
Okay, Mark Bayliss.
Well, just to answer that question, it's not remotely pork barrel-y. This is a community centre in a community that doesn't have a community centre. In fact, the West Side only has one. in Dines Green, which is some distance from Caseworker Gardens, particularly for the elderly. So it's interesting, and I wouldn't normally say this, but you know, a councillor who's got a community centre in his own patch, a good one, a large one, significant one, where we invest significant amount of money, to then be saying that another community that has very little to nothing, well, do they really need one? I think is a bit of a bit rich, shall we say? This building, yes, it's a question, and the answer is this community hasn't got a facility. It's got a very small downstairs of this. The upstairs is vacant, has been vacant, I understand, for over 2 years, and is available I understand we own the freehold of it anyway. It's a 99-year lease job where we're actually rebuying the lease off platform. It was a WCT and all, WCH and all the rest of it through the years. So we're a reacquiring use of a building that we actually own, and it is refurbishing that. I think there's an amount to buy out the lease and an amount to generate this property. I think it's a good move. I think it restores in St Clement's, a ward where they have no facilities at the moment. I think it restores and adds. I wish there were more buildings like this in other wards that don't have community facilities that we as a council could invest in and would make our community provision more equitable across the city than it is today. So I'm fully in support of that one, Chairman, but I hope that provides some justification for an answer to the question that was raised.
Thank you. Stephen Hodgson.
Thank you very much. Yes, I welcome these 4 proposals. I think regarding the Caseworker Gardens Institute, I must say I'm a trustee of the Lippard hub on the other side of the river, and we have recently invested in our loft to create an extra community room space because there is actually demand for these sort of community facilities and that. And it's about 5.5 miles away, the 2 community centres, so they are quite spread out. And actually, across that side, in the St Clement's side of the river, I used to live over there when I first came to Worcester, and I cast my first votes at the Caseworker Gardens Institute. So I know actually how little facilities there are over there. So I think that is very important. I think the cricket wicket at Northwick Park, again, that's a good idea as well, because anybody's seen the recent England performances, especially in the test, we haven't been particularly good, and we do need to get far more grassroots people playing cricket, and actually having facilities like this is just the precise thing we need. So it is a modest amount of money, so I think that is well worth doing it. I always support investing in our sporting fish in our city, and this is not for this year, but obviously we do need to be aware of on the radar that the nunnery wood track is in deteriorating condition, and at some point we will have to look at putting investment into that as well through some sort of funding stream as well. But overall, yes, I welcome these 4 proposals.
Great, thank you. Anyone else? I mean, from my own perspective, I put on record that I support these 4 proposals. I think there's an enormous amount of good that comes from each of these proposals. My own, obviously, the one I've got primary interested in is the work that is we're proposed to undertake in the Gorse Hill local nature reserve. I think that's something should have been done some time ago. There's quite a bit of activity on that particular area of land, some of which we don't particularly want to promote. And I think by tightening up, broadly speaking, the security offer there, I think we can make it much more attractive to people who want to walk their dogs, generally just explore what is a really attractive part of the city. And the view, for those who've not been up there, is quite extraordinary. So I'd encourage you to do that. I would also like to put a sentence or 2 in on the Caseworker Gardens Institute. We are we've got a disjointed offer in terms of community facilities in the city. Some areas are covered quite well, others not so. And I think this particular proposal gives us the potential to correct that sort of area where that particular part of St John's generally has been lacking for some considerable time. Is there any further comment on the four that we've got before us? Jenny Barnes and then Lynn Denham.
Thank you, Chair. Starting with the food bank, is 45,000 enough? I know that there's been discussions with the director, but with the state of family finances, and they're going to get worse as fuel rises and the NIC cuts in, more people may well end up relying on the food bank, and maybe we need to think about more than that. Northwick Park sounds great, and it'd be good once that's up and running to see whether other parks across Worcester could benefit from something like that. I'm all for that. Gorse Hill, great views from the top, completely agree with that. How much is Severn Trent going to put into the fencing? Because it seems to me that we shouldn't be putting the whole cost in, because they have a facility in there, and I wouldn't want to think that we were taking all the burden on that. And after you've answered that, I'll go on to the other one.
Sorry, Warwick, yes.
Through you, Chair. So initial scoping on the costs, we have engaged with Severn Trent over the principles of what we want to achieve in reducing motorbike access and other antisocial behaviour that's going up there. The costs are very overestimated, so that we don't have to come back for more costs to the committee. So what we'll do is obviously identify, what exact works will be going on, and where it is on Severn Trent facilities like the fencing, we'll look to what it actually is and what's fair in our investment and repair and maintenance thereafter. So it's, we've got an in-principle agreement with Severn Trent, and details to be worked up. So
will they be paying anything?
We haven't identified exactly what will actually solve the problem yet. So, but yeah, we have the conversation with them first.
Thank you. And the final point, Kimber Gardens Institute, an old building. I suspect that there won't be a lift put in for that amount of money. It's a large amount of money. So disabled access to the top floor might be an issue. To be honest, knocking it down and rebuilding would probably cost the same. And you could have a brand new facility on site. When you consider other availability for activities in St Clement's Ward, we've got Albury Park School, they let out rooms, there's Himbledon House, I'm sure they would be grateful for young footfall occasionally on their premises, and of course the university's got tons of facilities that we should be using. So and the library in the centre of St John's, lots of different spaces that may not be fully utilised at the moment. So I don't think that the Kimber Gardens Institute, at a very large amount of money for a facility that probably doesn't have disabled access, is good money for the city and will be only made aware to very few residents of Worcester overall, and only a very small amount around the St Clement's area. So I think that that shouldn't go forward.
Thank you. Yes, 4 very different items, very different bids from a variety of directions, in order in which we have them in the paper. Yes, support funding for the food bank. It's a kind of damning indication of central government priorities as to how essential the food bank is to survival of many citizens within Worcester. It's an amazing institution, and it's thanks to, you know, the generosity of donors in giving food and in the volunteers that run it, and that ensure that fellow citizens don't go hungry. And with reductions in universal credit, it's really, really important. And we have the data with about food poverty in the city. It's absolutely essential. Northwick Park cricket. I know Councillor Riaz is really disappointed that he wasn't able to be here this evening. He's actually had a funeral at short notice. That's the reason he's had to send his apologies. He's very passionate about cricket. And as you say, with, you know, recent, maybe not in Australia, but before that there was good cricket. It is about encouraging youth, encouraging young people to engage. It's not a facility that is currently available in the city. People have to travel outside of Worcester to have public access. It's kind of, my understanding is, you know, it's a facility that would have full public access rather than being linked to a club or managed by a club, and with it being an artificial wicket, it has more longevity and considerably lower, if more sort of negligible maintenance costs. So very supportive of that. It's a way of engaging young people, engaging others to develop an interest in cricket and to be physically active, and for the benefit in terms of health and well-being, and the opportunity then to progress into club cricket and other areas. Coma Gardens Institute, what have the Institute trustees been doing? 140,000 is an enormous amount of council taxpayers' money. I have no business case here. As a city council asset, as a city council property, we should be looking at what is best value for money for this property, and what we can best do with it, given that it has been residential in the recent past, and our desperate need for affordable housing in the city. I think a much more rounded review of the property, rather than a last-minute presentation, a huge amount of capital so that some people can dance. I don't think I can support that the way it's been presented to us. Gorse Hill and Ellery Mount Local Nature Reserve. Initially, when you look at the title, wonder why it was coming here. If it's a nature reserve, is that not part of Environment Committee? Why didn't the request go through there? If the issue is about antisocial behaviour and community safety, what other avenues have been explored to deal with that? I've seen no report mention of it at Safer Worcester meeting, which is the multi-agency community safety forum. Should there not be a multi-agency conversation? Should we not be looking at that through a different route, rather than looking to spend a very significant amount of reserves, which finance director tells us, you know, we are in a challenging financial position. I think I don't know if there's any further information around that, but it seems a bit premature to be for that large amount of money at this time.
Bring Shane at this point, please.
Through you, Chair, just on that final point, it's just worth noting, as the report states, these are proposals for the capital programme, so they wouldn't be drawing on our reserves as such. They would be funded from capital resources in future. So as they are capital items, we will need to receive more detailed reports in due course once there's various studies and feasibility work is undertaken, and there will be further decisions to be made down the line in respect of the value for money aspect of that. But the proposal, as we stand, is to consider including these within the capital programme for the time being. So they are part of our forward planning process. That's the decision we're looking for tonight.
Have you concluded, Lynn? Yes? Sorry. Yeah, thanks. Take Adrian and then Mark.
Thanks, Chair. I was just going to focus on the two capital issues. Just to say that, I do agree with some colleagues that we're being asked to commit nearly 200,000 on the basis of two very short paragraphs tonight, which is simply not acceptable. It wasn't acceptable on Monday night either at the Place Committee on the similar proposals. And I think what's happening here is generally that proposals are coming forward for use of the capital budget, and officers and members who've brought them forward are arguing that it may not be 140,000 or it may not be 50,000, but we're going to allocate that amount of money up to that amount of money, and then we're going to do this work. And okay, Shane, then the business cases will come forward and you do the work and identify exactly how much things are going to cost. But what will be said in July or August when the business case eventually comes forward will be, well, you've already agreed to do that, so we're going to do it regardless of what the business case says, regardless of how useful or otherwise that business case may be. You've committed up to 140,000 on this particular project, therefore that's what we're going to do. It's a standard approach. I understand the politics behind it. I know exactly why it's happening. There's no need for these capital projects to come forward at this stage. The most sensible thing to do is actually come forward and say, right, we would like to do something like this. Let's put a business case together. Let's ask officers and local members and local partners, such as those reported in the paragraphs in front of you. Let's do that work, and then we'll see how much that's going to cost and what is actually feasible. But as usual, we're doing horse before carriage, and I don't support those two items on the evidence that we've got in front of us.
Okay. Mark.
Thank you, Chair. Well, I wasn't there on Monday, but I've had a report of what happened at the Place Committee on Monday, and it appears that Labour are going to do exactly the same as they did there, which is, look a gift horse in the mouth. These are important programmes and developments for Worcester. And this is the budget, ladies and gentlemen. This is the budget. This is where we make the decisions on what this council is going to spend its money on in the coming years. It's entirely in order for capital as well as revenue projects to come forward, and we're making the case for these. If members don't like them, they're entitled to vote against them. The public will note what they've voted against. I'm sure we'll help them remember what they voted against. And here we are again, two things here. So cricket's fine because it was a Labour member that came forward, wants an artificial pitch. Well, actually, I think it's quite a good idea and I'm happy to go along with it. Two Conservative proposals here. Oh no, we couldn't do that. Where's the business case? And then we get this fantasy of it being an enormous amount of money. Well, let me tell Councillor Denham that her community centre in her ward cost 10 times when it was built 15 years ago. Cost 10 times the amount we're talking about here. So we're talking about something that's enormous, but you can have 10 times that in your ward. Chairman, that is just rank hypocrisy, and I'm afraid I'm not going to listen to any of that sort of nonsense. This ward has no community facility that we currently deliver. This will improve it. It's a relatively small term. You couldn't even build a one-bedroom flat for £140,000 in Worcester. And the idea that you could knock it down and create something new for less money, I really encourage members to go out and try and procure it for less. You know, there is absolutely no chance about that. I think it's a pretty fair point Jenny said about disabled access, and Councillor Barnes said about disabled access. Now, I would encourage officers to make sure that we, you know, factor those sorts of things in. And if it costs a little bit more to make sure that we are, I mean, we would be DDA compliant anyway, of course, but, you know, if we can make sure that people can use these facilities, absolutely right on, and I'm happy on that one. The Gore Seal and Abraham Mount, again, £50,000 is not a huge amount of money in capital terms. It's a relatively small sum. Again, I can only, just like the bridge across from Gulliver Park, the only thing wrong with these proposals is they're being made by this side, and that's again, we've got the same lack of willingness to accept that there are good ideas that come across both sides of the chamber. Again, you know, wrong on the riverside, wrong on the swimming pool, which of course they called a white elephant, and wrong again on these important proposals. So I'm hopeful that the committee will see the sense in these and that they're good for the people of Worcester, and the committee and the council in full time will vote for it.
Sorry, any further comment? Okay, oh, beg your pardon, Marjorie?
I'd just like some clarification that if we say yes to the recommendation, does that mean we've approved of those 4 projects?
Because we beg your pardon, just for clarity, because we've had this discussion before, yeah, take more. You know, there are 2 options essentially before us. We can either agree to take the whole thing on block, or we can go through them line by line. But that's essentially, you know, that's what is before us as we stand. But if members want to look another way, I was in PED on Monday evening, and that conversation was had then. We have got another item I want to just bring to your attention before we go down that route. So I don't know whether, was there a follow-up to that, Marjorie?
I think it may be.
Right.
Thank you, Chair. Just in terms of the order of the process, the decision to Policy and Resources Committee on the 8th of February, and that committee then would decide what to recommend through to Council on the 22nd, I think it is, at the end of the month. So that's the process. At this stage, we're asking members to make a recommendation for items to go through to the Policy and Resources Committee for decision when it takes into account all the other items from all the other committees in one go.
Thank you. Lynn.
So just to be completely clear, a vote for, which I think was Marjorie's question, a vote for in favour of one of these items is that you support the concept of the money being spent on that item and of that project going forward. That correct understanding?
That's correct.
Before we proceed, ladies and gentlemen, there is another item to bring to your attention. Is Warwick going to speak to this? Yeah. A paper that Warwick has presented to committee.
May I ask that we do take them one at a time, please, when we get to them?
Yeah. So, one extra item that is coming to committee tonight. I'll allow Warwick to develop the detail on this, but essentially the subject matter is Worcester Citizens Advice Bureau. Warwick?
Through you, Chair. Thank you. Committee might remember that this time last year, you set aside £35,000 for Citizen Advice Worcester to appoint a benefits and housing caseworker. We've been liaising with Worcester Citizens Advice the impact of the pandemic and the work that they've been doing to help our residents over the last 12 months. And the feedback from Worcester Citizens Advice Bureau is that the volume of inquiries has increased as expected over the last 12 months. For example, the number of people seeking advice and assistance from Worcester Citizens Advice who have been fed with emergency Worcester food bank vouchers issued through the CAB service for immediate need has increased by nearly 50% when compared to Q2 of the same year. So Q3 compared to Q2. So in the last 3 months, 50% increase in need. And the total number of people fed by Worcester food bank vouchers issued through the advice service during quarters to 1 to 3 was 3,180 people. That's the equivalent of it's more than the previous year, and I think even the last quarter has matched the first 3 quarters. So you know, the issue, you know, the volume of people coming to them is increasing. The caseworker has been So the other anticipated need is that during the pandemic, court possession proceedings have been suspended between March and September, and evictions being stayed for 2021. Therefore, housing-related debt advice would be in place for individuals and families at risk of eviction and homelessness at the end of this period and going into this financial year. So for the 9 months to date, for the funding has been attributed to cases for 97 individuals from Worcester. Each has an average of 6 contacts per case, comprising face-to-face meetings, emails, letters, calls, and with and on behalf of the client. In addition, each case has required legal research and administration and preparation time that aren't necessarily recorded on their management system. The Housing Benefits Caseworker operates a weekly housing court desk service at Worcester County Court to ensure that any respondents to possession proceedings are offered emergency help at the court itself. And so over the period of 9 months so far, they've helped 97 people with housing and benefits casework. They've advised these clients on 212 advice issues. They've completed 598 activities on behalf of those clients, and 50% of the individuals advised were either disabled or have long-term illness. Majority of these clients lived in 4 wards in Worcester: Cathedral, Warndon, Rainbow Hill and Gorse Hill. And the Housing Benefits Caseworker role has achieved positive outcomes for between 75 and 80% of those clients helped. So the ask is that we continue the provision of this additional caseworker for Worcester residents, specifically for the next financial year. We've been given estimated costs of £40,033 to continue the funding to cover the salary and a little bit towards overheads. The other challenge is it's expected that, as I said, that the challenges of the current year will continue into this financial year, and there's an additional uncertainty over the current funding from the Money Advice and Pensions Service. So they're potentially they could lose at least 1 full-time caseworker from across the Herefordshire and Worcester service. So obviously this funding would not only ensure the casework that's been going on continues, but also mitigate for any loss in staff.
Okay, many thanks. Any questions or comment specifically about this particular item? Adrian.
Yeah, I just wondered if you could clarify what you're asking us to agree tonight without the benefit of a paper. what I'm feeling is this is you want to get this through to agree it to go to P&R, and we'll see that report that Warwick's talked through at P&R, in which case I'm quite comfortable with that. Just to clarify, that's what is happening. Yeah.
Any further questions or comment, Mark?
Could I ask Shane a question about whether this, or Lloyd, is this a question? Is this a activity that can be funded through Conf and through further support that we can bring down from elsewhere?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Bayes. Yeah, potentially yes. Certainly, the steer from Public Health is very open, is very flexible with the use of comp funding, so we can certainly take that away, and members are minded to approve the potential funding source.
And through you, Chair, in terms of the process point, yes, this will be the report will be included as an annex to the report that goes to Policy and Resources, so you can see the details in full there.
Okay, Jenny Barnes, please.
Thank you, Chair. So for absolute clarity, how much money do you want CAB to receive for how many years?
Warwick, do you want to take that one?
Through you, Chair. So the ask from Worcester CAB is just over 40,000 for one financial year for that case officer.
Any further questions or comment? Okay, right. So we move to the recommendations. I'm just going to pause just for 2 seconds until specifically. Yes. Or again. So it's 1.3 that we're drilling into the detail a little bit more with. But if we take the recommendation 1.1, 1.2 and 1.4, and if you'd show your acceptance or otherwise of that, please. I'd like to indicate. So that's, we're not talking, we'll talk about the specifics of each individual item in a second, but we're just dealing with the broad setting of the budget at the moment.
Sorry, Chair, from the point of view of clarity, it would be simpler if we took 1.1 and 1.2 and then went through the other two. The 1.3 reflects the capital items and 1.4 reflects the revenue items, so it would be simpler to do it that way.
Agreed, understood, yes. So 1.1 and 1.2, if you could just repeat your acceptance of that, please, by a show of hands. Okay, thank you.
Yes, that is carried.
1.3. Right, forgive me, I just wanted to make sure that we were absolutely sort of as watertight as I can ever be on that one. So 1.3, we're dealing specifically now with the Comer Gardens Institute proposal. I'd like to show hands, please, acceptance of that.
Benefit. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 6 floors. 7 4.
May I ask that my vote be recorded in favour of that, please? Of course. Under regulations.
And those against, please. Gareth, thank you. Similarly with Gorse Hill and Elbury Mount Local Nature Reserve, those in favour of, please show.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8.
Okay.
In favour.
And those against, please.
1, 2, 3 against.
Okay. Okay, right, again, so we're moving on to 1.4 now. The items there are Worcester Food Bank. Those in favour, please show.
Chair, that's carried.
And the proposal, Northwick Park, again.
Yes, same, carried unanimously, yeah.
And the additional proposal, Worcester Citizens Advice Bureau, please show. Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. This is our regular quarterly performance report, this time for Q3. Pleased to note that the vast majority of the indicators and projects are on target. Well, there's one item which is flagging up as a red flag, which is in respect of the total number of HMOs licensed as percentage of total number of suspected HMOs in the city. There is a note on that referencing a backlog due to attention being paid to the additional licensing scheme. We have some short-term resourcing issues which we're looking to resolve in that. Trust that once those are resolved, then the performance will return to the target level. There are detailed notes against any of the other items, but we'll do our best to answer any queries if there are any. Thank you.
Any questions or comment with regard to the Q3 performance report, please? Jenny Barnes.
Thank you, Chair. In some of these areas, there are no targets, perhaps because crime, you'd like to have no crime at all, but that's not really realistic. It'd be useful if we could have some kind of target, so we do understand how we're getting to a much lower area. Because at the moment, you've just got one line, which doesn't really mean very much. We don't understand what interventions might have gone in that could have affected targets. So I'd really like to see that target line in the future. I think there's 4 categories where there is no target.
Okay, Shane.
Through you, Chair. Thank you. The principles accepted. We will be bringing the annual scorecard to the committee at its next meeting, and that'll be the opportunity then to set the targets or explain the rationale for not having them. So we'll address that at the next meeting.
Warwick.
Through you, Chair, specifically the crime figures, it's a little difficult to compare year on year because the way the police record crime changes quite regularly, and they change categories and tags. So, and I think I put in the most recent reports how locally a lot of what previously recorded ASB has been recorded as crime because of the impact of it. So the figures have changed quite dramatically in the last quarter. So that's just an indication of how crime is recorded. It changes quite regularly. So it's quite difficult to map year on year. Obviously, we do celebrate when crime figures go down, though.
Through you, Chair. It wasn't just crime, it was also homelessness figures, which obviously we can impact. So it'd be good to have targets on so that we can measure ourselves against that.
Any further comment with regard to this item? Linda.
Thank you, and thank you to officers for the report, because obviously a great deal of work and effort goes behind these. They are measures of performance and what the services have achieved in difficult times. The number of small grants awarded, pleased to see that, and the rather interesting eclectic mix of those who've received grants from the council, the Literacy Festival, ASPI, City Care at St Paul's Church, basketball and ESO, which is, it shows the breadth of culture within our city. So a question so is there still money available for this financial year that we'd be looking to spend, or that, and will there be a carryover into next financial year? So that's my first comment.
Warwick, did you want to take that?
Through you, Chair. Yeah, so we're in the great position of being able to use some of the comp funding that we've received from county. And so we've not only got the existing community grants pots, but we've got more than that. So we have allocated our this year's medium grants pot, so that has been used up, but we've been able to then use the wider comp funding, the contained outbreak management funds funding, sorry, using acronyms, which has come through government, through county to us.
Further comment or questions? Lynn again. Yeah.
Thank you. I mean, obviously the red measure is the one always to look at and concern. And I think particularly around percentage of HMOs, because the state of housing is absolutely vital to the well-being of our citizen. And we know that particularly unlicensed HMOs is a great concern to tenants themselves if housing isn't up to a standard, and to the neighbours of those properties. And, you know, when there's a problem with landlords in some areas, it's difficult if you're not able to go to your local councillor or to get the support that's needed. So what are we doing to address that and to ensure that the private sector housing is up to standard and is at a safe standard within Worcester?
Lloyd?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Shane mentioned earlier that we've identified the need for additional resource, and if we haven't done so, we're just about to go to recruit for a senior environmental health officer to drop into the private sector housing team, not just as an additional body, but as another sort of fully qualified senior officer to support the frontline officers in doing their work. The dip has certainly occurred during COVID. It was difficult for officers to get behind doors as a result of both government restrictions and looking after our own staff's welfare as well. So that's the primary cause of where we are. Prior to that, we always held steady at around 75%. I know there were always some questions from members around that. But I'd like to think now that restrictions are lifted and we're getting back to normal, and with the additional resource, we can get back to where we are fairly quickly.
Any further comment, questions? In which case, the recommendation is that we note the report. Colleagues happy to do that, yes? Okay, thank you. And on we go to the next item, which is the completion report on the Thriving EU Migrants Community and City project. Warwick?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for putting this item on the agenda this evening. As members will remember, this came through an initial decision in 2020 from the Policy and Resources Committee, which approved the use of the allocate or remaining Brexit grant funding received by government to put towards an additional post within the community services team for a fixed term contract of 12 months to provide a community support to local citizens affected by the Brexit process. And we set out 6 key areas of engagement, specifically the EU settlement scheme support, providing migrant communities with access to services, providing housing and homeless support, facilitating community development, ensuring community safety and improving health and well-being. Not long after the project started, the pandemic hit, and so that did affect our ability to deliver a lot of the areas of the project that we wanted to deliver. However, despite the pandemic and the various lockdowns over the period, throughout the lifetime of the project officer was able to deliver a high volume of casework and more importantly, face-to-face casework. So some of the performance indicators we've picked out, 548 cases dealt with, 355 face-to-face meetings, which is really crucial at the time, 193 individual clients helped, and of those, 27 nationalities covered within the project. So, in putting that officer in that position, in that place, in the community at that time, we were able to understand the issues affecting our resident communities and identify what was preventing many non-UK nationals from accessing help. And we did that by providing drop-in sessions at the Guildhall initially, and then when Trinity House opened, we were there too. And we also did quite a big promotional campaign on the EU settlement scheme and what support was available. As a result of those cases, and obviously we've given you the attached report, but I thought it was really that what came across from this project really was some of the cases themselves. So if you don't mind, I'll just sort of pick out a couple of the case studies from the report just to go through. We had a homeless EU national who, despite submitting their application for settlement status in January 2020, had no further response from the Home Office by the following September that year, and as a result found himself in limbo with no entitlement to benefits or homeless stroke housing assistance. So with our officer being involved and getting to know or knowing the case, it was easier to understand what was happening. But the individual had no criminal history of offending, and their application shouldn't have taken more than 6 months to proceed. But it still continued to be a problem, and even raising through local MP and other, and raising, constantly raising the issue with people about this particular case. It just wasn't being progressed. Unexpectedly, during one of the face-to-face meetings, there was a message from the Salvation Army, and it turned out the individual was being contacted in relation to a previous modern-day slavery issue. The officer picked this up with the Home Office, and regarding the individual being protected as part of the the national referral mechanism. And as soon as soon after the gentleman received the decision, and it's thought that the delay would have been because it was waiting for the MDS process to take place. So if it wasn't for that intervention, things could have gone even further and even longer without resolution. So that was one very successful intervention from the caseworker. Another one was, during the project, it became apparent that a number of those seeking EU settlement support in the city were also eligible for Windrush. And the scheme's been going on for a few years and allows submission for applicants by individuals who arrived in the UK before 1988. Looking into the Windrush scheme, it seemed a simpler process to apply for, and also gives the individuals permanent status. And so it turned out that 4 individuals aged between 50 and 80 received support in being able to contact the Home Office, request the proper application forms and submit their applications. And as a result, those clients have permanent residence now with indefinite leave to remain in the UK as part of that scheme. And then finally, another one to raise, the benefit of this sort of one-to-one and face-to-face engagement. It was elderly parents first approached the officer when at Trinity Street in the Housing Advice Centre while running the bi-weekly face-to-face appointments. Clear about the third family member requiring assistance in the process, but they were isolating because they had complications and didn't want to, during the pandemic, didn't want to leave the house. Their daughter was in her 40s and due to ill health and the health implications was obviously vulnerable. So it was not possible for the daughter to actually come to the centre. But over time, working with the parents and trying to deliver the support remotely to the daughter. But over time, worked on building that rapport. And after several months, there was a surprise meeting where the daughter came along to one of the sessions. And unfortunately, because of the daughter's footprint not just being non-existent to the Home Office, it was very difficult to actually get the information to support the EUSS application. So over time and obviously highs and lows, finally managed to get that with the engagement from the officer, managed to get all three of them settlement status. But I just wanted to draw your attention to those sorts of cases that were the benefit of appointing this officer. So the case-based approach was part of the scheme. We also wanted to make sure that frontline services were robust and didn't provide a barrier for our residents to engage in the services that every resident should have access to. So a lot of work went with key partner agencies, and we identified 50 in total during the project, which varied in their scope and support. And we ran sort of workshops identifying what barriers to opportunity and engagement they were, and ran also online webinars to talk through several things like modern day slavery and the EU settlement scheme and what the benefits were, and to widen the to make sure that there was no wrong door, as it were, when people were engaging with services. So. And then I just wanted also to pick up an element of the project, which is one of those opportune moments. People might know of the Like You charity, and during the same period of the project, the Migrant Support Centre being set up in the city centre. And as part of the project, we worked closely with the Like You charity, who has a specific focus on European nationals, and we identified 10 volunteers, multilingual volunteers from 5 different countries, to train them up to support people struggling with the language barrier. And so it's all about engagement and sort of getting people access into services and that friendly and familiar face. 3 of the volunteers went on to complete Citizens Advice training, quite an intense block training, so that they were able to triage people and give people the advice and access to what they, identify the services that they required. The Migrant Support Centre also adopted and hosted an online content, which helped also break down those barriers to engagement. 2 of those volunteers have subsequently become employed, with one trained to be an immigration advisor, and that's the only one registered by the Home Office within the whole county. So it absolute benefits to Worcester residents. And the Like You charity has continued to support those volunteers on our behalf, giving them training and continuing to support people access services.
Okay, many thanks. Any thoughts or comment, please? Marjorie.
I'd just like to say, well done. I think it sounds absolutely amazing that you've managed to achieve so much in such difficult circumstances. But one other thing, which is that on page 72, there's a reference to, the legacy and what happens now. And I think it's really important to focus on that and keep up the momentum.
Thank you, Marjorie. And I should have made it clear, Basher was the officer, hence being here tonight. And yes, from the onset, we knew it was a short-term project, but it was all about the legacy, wasn't it? We wanted to make sure that those services were robust and there was no wrong door and there was no barriers to access going forwards.
I've got Mike and then Adrian.
Thank you, Chair. We talk about a migrant support centre and the fact that they've gained big big lottery funding. How long is that going to last? And is there at some point that the service might need to have back to actually provide a sort of almost unified service?
Through Chair. Yeah, so we're constant dialogue with Migrant Support Centre. Yes, their funding does have an end, and very much sort of listening to what their need is. Yes, sustainability, we make sure that that services are working together. As I said, don't want barriers, don't necessarily want to create different streams for people to go through. But the benefit of the service that's on offer is that so people will come to have them join them, go to the GP, so that, you know, that sort of, that trusted friend, that sort of interpreter, that advisor is there. So it is a bit of an added service to help people engage with services. But yeah, always listening. If there was a need, a request from those services, we bring it to yourselves for information. But obviously, in the first instance, we'd like people to obviously be sustainable themselves, and look for third-party funding as well.
And Adrian, then Jenny.
Yeah, Chair, I mean, I obviously very interested to see the final report that's come out. I mean, what it demonstrates, firstly, is that when the government introduces these support schemes and these the whole process of trying to support migrants and others in the community, it does it quite at a high level, and it very rarely actually investigates what the process is or the practicalities are at the ground level of how you go about it. And you know, the fact that we're able to fund this post facilitated getting this work done. Without that, those people would not have been supported and would not have gained their confidence and got the grants right, or their housing situations right, and all those kind of things. Now, those things don't go away easily. So I wonder whether this report is going to go anywhere else other than just within, you know, the bounds of Worcester or Worcestershire. It strikes me that it is a sort of thing which ought to be going back through the MP. There ought to be the sort of message that gets to people who are funding local government and other agencies, that you need that direct support, that hand-holding process at the start of these things, in order that the individuals can then make themselves sustainable. And it's that the fact also, of course, that we don't know how many people have fallen through the net without having access to it. And so we note that the post itself that we're talking about is due to end at the end of this financial year. There is clearly, that's not when the problem stops, on the 31st of March. So I think that we, as part of that, as Marjorie says, a legacy is important. What kind of things can we do or put into place or campaign for or follow up, which will ensure that the role and the processes that people have to go through are still adequately supported at a local level. Because, you know, I don't know if you've watched the news recently, but the migrant problem has not actually stopped, it's actually getting worse.
And I've got Jenny Barnes and then Jim Carver.
Thank you, Chair. Great report, really good reading. My experience of, like you, the charity based by the railway arches in the middle of Worcester is they really have tried to actually link into the local community of Arboretum as well. Arboretum Residents Association has taken them to heart, and they actually use the facilities at Like You for their meetings. So it's not just linking across European residents, it's also linking in with the whole community in Arboretum, and that is much broader than just European. So it's a really good organisation. I'm glad you've recognised it and we've worked with it so much. Thank you.
And Councillor Carter.
Thanks very much for all your hard work on this. Yeah, I mean, picking up on Adrian's point, I think what we've got here is this, the way I've read this report, this obviously was before I was elected to the council, but this really, I saw the crux of this was helping EU migrants to actually get through the application process with regards to establishing permanent residency. So I think it's a very different thing to issues facing, that we're seeing on the news with regards to migration. And of course, we do still have support for such projects through the WCF, of course, through lottery funding. There will be government funding coming forward. So I think we mustn't muddle the whole thing, and we should say the good work's been done here, and there's going to be government funding available from the Gang Masters and Labour Abuse Authority, for example. You'll continue to work with GLLA, and I'm really encouraged to see that you're working as a volunteer at CAB. So obviously, I get the impression that this won't sort of just stop now. There will be a continuation of support. But of course, the bigger point to come out of this, of course, is that people have now established permanent residency, which is a good thing. That's a great thing. So now let's move on to the next stage, stop revisiting this, and actually become more cohesive within Worcester City as a community. Thanks for your hard work.
Thank you. And Lynn Denham.
Thank you. And thank you to Basher and to the team. You've achieved an enormous amount in a short space of time, and there is legacy there in terms of relationships and increased understanding and networks. It does illustrate, it has identified very significant, fact that you were helping people from the Windrush generation. Windrush cases absolutely illustrate, I think, some of the government processes, as Adrian has highlighted. There's a vast difference, isn't there, between the high-level rules and strategies and actually helping people, and it is investing in people and the advocacy. Map your way through really complex systems as well as potentially mapping them in a foreign language. I think there's a couple of key points that have been raised. So, I mean, Adrian's question, so as a committee, can we ask that this report is sort of, officially shared with the MP, or where else would be suitable for it to go? And then also to follow up on Councillor, I think sustainability of this is a concern that we all share, because the needs have not gone away. It's not an end. I mean, is there other government funding pots? Can we ask officers to look into that, or to potentially put a bid in for those?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I was just going to say that, as the conversation has played out, obviously we have an opportunity with the integrated care partnership work, and the sort of work that Basher and colleagues have carried out. Yes, it may be housing, yes, it may be finance, but actually what that's doing is making people feel a bit better about themselves, a bit happier and a bit healthier. So I will certainly commit to taking that conversation away and this report away, as part of our district collaborative work around that, because there are people from multi-agencies sat around the table, and we all need to be brought into the process.
Was there a second point, or?
Well, it's about accessing other pots of funding. The Carver alluded to there being government money if we haven't accessed in order to get some cash to continue.
But what I was specifically pointing to there was, for example, I used the example with regards to the scheme with regards to tackling modern slavery, which of course is one of the issues that was highlighted. And I know Bazia and her colleagues did a lot of work on, and it continues to be an issue actually across all communities. It's a very serious issue. That's not going to go away. That's just one example of government funding that, that's made available with regards to tackling gangmasters.
Yeah, I mean, I assume, very much assume that will be part of the wider conversation that goes forward.
Yes, please. Thank you very much. First of all, I would like to say big thank you to Worcester City Council for recognising that there was a need to support both European and non-European nationals living and settled in Worcester in going through the EU settlement process, because it was not only for EU nationals, it was for their family members, regardless of where they came from. And some of those non-European cases were the more difficult ones, and many of them are still in the process of waiting for the decisions from the Home Office. So many people are still in the limbo, but with the work that we've done with the volunteers at the Migrant Support Centre, we managed to jointly support a great number of people, and those people were supported not only with the EU settlement scheme applications initially, but then later on helped with housing issues, queries, benefits. So it really spilled into a number of different areas. And trust me, as a migrant myself, a lot of people, we would always say, why don't you go to the CAB, Citizen Advice Bureau? They do give advice. A lot of people are very apprehensive, and as you can imagine yourself, during the pandemic, doing things over the phone just didn't work for many people, and hence the face-to-face appointments were crucial. Now, in terms of the funding, just to, for those of you who don't know the history of this project, I actually started working initially on a Controlling Migration Fund project that was managed by Wyre Forest District Council. And as part of that project, I spent 2 days working in Worcester with the private sector housing team, looking into issues that migrants had within private sector housing. So we were looking into HMOs and the rogue landlords. And it was from that project that Worcester City recognised that there was the Brexit funding available, and we managed to come up with this idea. So I believe, I haven't explored myself what funding is there, but I believe that the equivalent of Controlling Migration Fund is somewhere there, or will be offered by the government. Yes, the issues related to migrants will be slightly different. The migrants that are coming to the UK currently, European migrants will need a visa, so that's a very different immigration issue at a higher level than the EU settlement scheme, so you would need trained advisors for that. But nothing stops us. We had asylum seekers coming to the Migrant Support Centre. We had people who were here also as illegal immigrants, so irregular migrants, asking for help. And we've managed to actually help a few connect with the Home Office, where they were hiding for many years and basically escaping from facing the reality of being illegal in the country. So I do believe that in the city there is a need for supporting or continuing to support migrants. And kudos to Worcester City, because none of the other local authorities in Worcestershire picked up on this. And I had a lot of colleagues ringing me from all around the area asking for advice, specifically on the EU settlement scheme at the time when a lot of people lost their jobs, lost their accommodation, found themselves in temporary accommodation, and colleagues in other areas didn't know what to do with them, how to help them. So I managed to actually support quite a lot of colleagues across the area, across the whole Worcestershire and even Herefordshire. So thank you very much for recognising the need. Well done.
Many thanks. Can I say, perhaps in conclusion, I think this is a great piece of work. I think an enormous amount of good has come out of this. One of the things that I think we've all, as councillors, sort of acknowledged, we haven't been good at reaching out and engaging with certain parts of our wider community. Anything that we can do to enhance that level of engagement is absolutely critical. So, you know, many, many thanks for the work you've done. The recommendation is that we note the contents of the report. Can I just be, yes? Sorry, yes.
What I was trying to suggest is that we actually strengthen that recommendation. I think what we're actually saying, most of us around the table, is more than just noting the contents of the report, but actually could we make a recommendation to formally share this report with the local MP, and also ask officers to investigate future funding.
Well, I think what came out of Lloyd's response was that we are going to definitely do that. That's part of it. And I strongly suspect that it would be part of my and Jabba's responsibility as chair and coach and vice chair of the committee to make sure that it's on briefings, that it comes back to the committee throughout the year, so that we do get updates. I mean, you know, if you know, we could obviously, if that's an amendment that you want to put to the meeting, then we have to go through the usual procedures with that. But if you have an amendment and you have a seconder, then we can potentially proceed on that basis.
I'm willing to second it if you want, but I mean, if you can make sure that the minutes record that view, then I think that would.
Chair, you can do this one two ways. I can certainly record both those requests from Lynn as part of the minutes, and as you explained, you've had an officer response to one. If you want to take a formal decision on it, then yes, by all means. I mean, the other element that was requesting whether the report could be shared with the local MP, and you might want to ask members if they're happy to proceed with that request.
Yeah. I mean, I think I know we are committed now to share the report with Member of Parliament, that we are going to make sure that this is not a lost narrative. It doesn't end there, essentially. So we're happy to proceed on that basis. Are you content to do that?
I think a formal minted recommendation just strengthens the view and the aspiration. Ask officers to seek opportunity or to investigate funding, so that the key outcome and the ability to help is still available.
So, Adrian, you're happy to second that? Yes. Is there any comment before we investigate any from this side of the room? We're happy to proceed on the basis of that. That becomes 1.1 essentially of this recommendation. Yeah. Okay. So just for clarity's sake, just because we now got a 1.1, the recommendation 1 is that we note the contents of the report, but 1.1, can I just have a show of hands to say we're happy to proceed on the basis of that addition? Okay.